What does cake mix and motor oil have in common? What's in a bottle of motor oil anyway? And what makes a boutique oil different than an API or Dexos licensed oil? Hi, I'm Lake, the motor oil geek, and to answer those questions, we're here at High Performance Lubricants in the lab to pull back the label on the motor oil and show you what's inside, and to answer all those questions, including what makes cake mix similar to motor oil. To get you those answers, we're going to blend up a synthetic API SP GM Dexos 1 Gen 3 licensed 5W30 motor oil, and we're going to show you every step of the process. We're going to show you the base oils, the additive package, the viscosity modifier. We're holding nothing back. We're going to show you everything that it takes to make one of these oils, and then, just for fun, we're going to show you the boutique way of doing it. Because that's one thing about high performance lubricants that I really like. They approach things kind of the way I did when I was at Joe Gibbs Racing. We were never interested in making mass market API oils, which, to be honest, a lot of times it's about price point. Getting it something that will pass the spec for as little as money as possible. Of course, the marketing guys want to sell it for as much money as possible. We were always focused instead on trying to make products for the application. Application always dictates chemistry, which is why we made racing oils, which are completely different than API licensed oils. But that's a completely different story. Today, we're going to show you how to make an API licensed oil, but then we're going to show you what happens if you make any changes to that formula. So this is going to be fun, so stay tuned. So just like that old Dunkin' Donuts commercial, it's time to make the donut. It's time to make the motor oil. David Stoiber is here. We brought him back because you did such a great job last time.
Yep.
With the foam testing. It was the most epic visual in any video I've ever seen. I loved it.
Thank you.
It was fantastic. You guys have a great lab here, which is why we're back here. Walk everyone through what this is, because really, when I mentioned earlier in the video about how motor oil and cake mix have something in common, this is where it gets to be that common piece.
Yeah, so this is the additive package that we will use to make certified Dexos 1 Gen 3 oil. This has everything you need in it to make the oil. All we do is add base oil and the eye improver.
So that's the ZDP, molybdenum, antioxidant, dispersant, detergents.
4-point depressant, anti-foam, everything is in here you need.
Literally, yeah, it's like the cake mix, like I said. Like all we need is
base oil and the eye improver.
So speaking of the eye improver, from our previous video, when we did all that work, and you did a great job, by the way, with all of those bespoke blends, when we tested all the different viscosity index improvers, and we saw the difference in shear stability, that's actually the difference between this product being API SP only or being API SP and the GM Dexos 1 Gen 3. That's a lot of words to say, by the way.
It is.
It's got a tongue twister. Talk about the shear stability and what makes these different.
So this is a 35 SSI OCP eye improver, and so it's more susceptible to shear than a 5 SSI or lower that we tested out in the last video.
And what's the API SP? You can get away with that with a 50 SSI.
Yep, all 50.
Yeah, so you could have a 50 SSI version of this, and it would just pass the API SP.
Yep.
Yeah, best barely, yeah. By going to the 35, then we can add in
a little bit better shear stability,
which will allow you to have the GM Dexos 1 Gen 3 certification, is because that added shear stability.
Yep.
But literally, that's all you need are these 4 components.
Correct.
We can blend them all up, and then I think for fun we should run some lab tests.
Absolutely, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah, after them to see, well, how does that formula stack up to this 5W30 synthetic API SP Dexos 1 Gen 3 to see how comparable this off-the-shelf oil actually is to what we're going to make right here.
All right, sounds good.
Let's blend it up. When it comes to the additive package, there are only 4 companies that make the additive packages. Thinking about that Betty Crocker Cake mix again, you got Lubrizol, Afton, Chevron Oronite, and Infineum. Those 4 companies make what's called the DI package, the detergent inhibitor package, which allows you to, like that box of Betty Crocker Cake mix, you can buy that DI package. Then you can basically blend that in with the base oils and the viscosity index improvers to make the oil. And just like the back of that box of Betty Crocker Cake mix happens to have the directions and the instructions, the other things you need to make the cake, guess what? When you buy a DI package, it comes with all the same stuff so that you can make the oil. Because that's what the additive companies are best at, is making complete chemistry packages. Because companies like Afton and Lubrizol, they have their own engine test labs. Just like in that video we did recently, we went to Valvoline and we showed their test lab. Guess what? Lubrizol, Afton, they have those own test labs in-house. All 4 of those companies are doing API, ASTM, engine testing, and other types of testing to make sure that that additive package they deliver will actually meet the specs that it claims to meet. And that's how this business works. That's how a company like Napa has their own brand of oil. They're not making that oil. They're not formulating that oil. So can you trust whether that oil actually is going to meet the specs that it needs? Well, it's the Lubrizols, the Aftons, the Oronites, the Infineums that are doing the hard work, the heavy lifting, the testing to make sure that those products will actually meet those specs. So as we mentioned earlier, as long as you follow the recipe with the DI pack, you can get API approval or whatever approval that ad pack comes with. But what happens if you start adding a lot of stuff?
Yeah, so this is one of our PCMO 5W30s, and we start with an ad pack just like we did the other blends, right? But we put a better base oil in it, and that automatically disqualifies us from being API SP or Dexos 1 Gen 3.
Right.
So while we're at it, we decided we'll also put a better BI improver in. So instead of a 35 SSI, we have a 0 to 5 SSI. And then we add other things like alkylate naphthalene, seal conditioner. We boost the TBN.
Yep.
More
antioxidants. Yeah.
Antifoam.
Yeah.
And everything else we need to make a better product.
Yeah. And this is just a PCMO.
Correct.
And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 components in a PCMO.
Yep. Plus whatever's in the ad pack.
Right, plus what's in the ad pack, which is a whole lot of other stuff.
Yep.
And that's not even what you do for a race oil. Race oil would be even more stuff than that.
Yep, another 4 or 5 bottles.
Which doesn't mean just because it's more stuff means you should use it in your passenger car. Don't use race oil in your passenger car. It's not made for that.
Yep, it won't be good for the emission stuff.
It won't be good for a lot of things, right? But the idea is that all of these components are just boosting and adding to what's already there.
Increasing the performance of a good starting point and making it even better.
Right, because it's application-specific chemistry. So now we have our API SP Dexos 1 Gen 3. It's a mouthful.
That it is.
It's blended up, it's ready to go. So now what are we going to do, David?
So now we're going to change the base oil and the viscosity modifier.
That's right. But once we do that, we can't license it anymore unless we want to go spend $1 million and have it tested. And the reality is there's no market for that. It's just too much money to go spend to have all the API sequence tests run again to verify that the formula is better. So that's why the boutique oils don't have API licensing, because once you make that change and you add in better ingredients, no more license.
It disqualifies you from the license.
Even though it will probably perform better, and we'll show you the results from those tests later in this video. But now we need to go ahead and blend up our outlaw formula, and we're going to use one of my all-time favorite products, right? So we're going from a group 3
to a PAO.
We got Syn Fluid 4 here, so that's a PAO 4, and we're going to use our metallocene PAO 100. This is my favorite thing ever, by the way. But we can't just swap from the group 3 to the PaO without adding a little bit of, you can't see this, this is secret. What's this, David?
That's an ester.
Ester, that's right. We need some solubility because that's the downside of the PaOs compared to the group 3s, is they have less
Solubility.
Yep. And something needs to solubilize that additive package, keep it in suspension and keep sludge and varnish and things like that from settling out. So to add solubility, we add an ester, or you could add alkylated naphthalene.
Dispersant.
Right? You can do different things. In this case, we're just going to use some ester just for fun because we can. So, all right, enough of me yapping. I got to start blending. So let's get started.
All right.
Remember, there's only 3 companies that make PaO synthetic base oils and less than a dozen companies that make the group 3 synthetic base oils. Now let's dig into those results. We're going to break them down into 3 key areas. We're going to look first at the additive package, then we're going to check out the viscosity, and then we're going to dig into the details on the oxidation stability. Remember, these are 3 different oils. 3 different because 2 of them have the same additive package, but the base oils are different. Now, we don't know what's in the naphtha oil, but we know it meets the same spec. So this will be kind of interesting to see. For an oil that meets the same spec, how much variation can there be? And the first thing that I see is that our Betty Crocker Cake mix blend looks really familiar. What I mean by that is that when we look at these results from just using the HiTEC 11183 formulator, just following exactly the way Afton said to do it, we see that this oil has about 200 parts per million boron, roughly, about 1,300 parts per million calcium, about 500 to 600 parts per million manganese, right about 70 parts per million on the molybdenum. The zinc phosphorus is right there in that API SP range of 600 minimum, 800 maximum. So this fits that API SP GM Dextrose 1 Gen 3 model perfectly because that's what it is. If you remember from our video when we did synthetic versus conventional, this additive package looks really similar to that Walmart SuperTech. And remember, that synthetic oil actually did better than the name brand conventional oil. The numbers aren't exact, but they're never going to be exact. We can do the same blend 3 times and the numbers won't be exactly the same all 3 times. But that profile fits. Now, I'm not saying that Walmart SuperTech uses this additive package. It might, but it might not. But this is that profile of what a typical API SP oil is. And we've seen that same additive package in the Costco Kirkland brand oil as well. So with the Kirkland oil, the magnesium and the calcium are a little bit lower, but that ZDP level is the same, the molybdenum's the same. The point is these private label oils are using these packages like the HiTEC 11183 from Afton or whatever Lubrizol or Oronite or Infineum's equivalent is. That's what they're using. None of these guys are doing engine testing, right? Walmart's not doing engine testing. Costco's not doing engine testing. They're using the additive packages from the additive companies that have done the engine testing to make sure that these oils will meet the spec. That's the key. Now let's take a look at our bespoke blend. And we can see right off the bat, the additive package is the exact same because we didn't change anything with the additive package. When you look at the naphtha oil, which is made by Valvoline, there's way more molybdenum. Now, when we talk about molybdenum, what we're really talking about is a chemical compound called MODTC. That's an abbreviation for molybdenum dithiocarbamate. That's hard to say, so we just call it MODTC or moly, because that's way easier to say. So in this case, we're going to call it moly. There's more moly in this oil. Remember, Valvoline has its own test lab, so they could add more moly to the oil, not only as a friction modifier, but moly is also a secondary antioxidant. Now the trick is you can say, oh, I'm just going to throw more MODTC in my oil. It's not that simple. When you add moly, you typically are going to increase the amount of deposit. The formulator's job is to balance that. You got to change up that detergent package slightly to accommodate that higher moly so you don't increase deposits and not pass the deposit control part of the test. So the next part is the viscosity. And here's where we can really begin to see some differences in these products. The first thing is the cold crank simulator. That's that 5W performance. And what we see is our Betty Crocker Cake mix blend easily passes the 5W. In fact, it's actually a little bit better than the Napa oil is. But then our boutique blend, by going from that group 3 to the group 4, group 5 blend on the base oils, it goes even lower. So that's a big advantage to the boutique blend. And of course, we also use that more shear stable polymer. We went from that 35 SSI OCP style viscosity index improver. Now, the higher that number, the less stable the oil is in terms of shear stability. The lower the number, the more shear stable it is. So going from that 35 SSI OCP style viscosity index improver, we see a big change in shear stability going with that 5 SSI star polymer from Lubrizol. The boutique blend stayed in grade as it didn't shear out of grade, whereas the Betty Crocker Cake mix blend, it did shear out of grade. Even with that 35 SSI polymer, that more shear stable polymer required by the Dexo spec, it still sheared down to a 20 grade, where our boutique blend didn't. So the boutique blend definitely won out here in terms of viscosity. But when we go look at our third area of performance, oxidation stability, how long can the oil live? This is where the Napa oil actually beat both of them. Remember we said earlier about how the Napa oil had that higher level of molybdenum, that MODTC, the molybdenum dithiocarbamate, that anti-wear additive that's also a friction modifier, is also an antioxidant. The guys at Valvoline had boosted the level of MODTC in the Napa formulation. Of course, they had the ability to do that in-house testing so they could be certified with that higher level of molybdenum, and it gives it a higher oxidation stability. Head to head, if you're just doing oxidation stability testing, the Napa oil beat both our boutique blend and our Betty Crocker Cake mix blend. So this is actually a really important thing to understand, because a lot of times oil marketers are going to say, well, this boutique blend is better because it has these fancy ingredients. Well, fancy ingredients doesn't always translate into better performance. You have to define better. In this case, that ester we used, that group 5 base oil we used as the co-base stock along with our group 4 PAO synthetic, it was more of a racing type ester. It's designed for that high intensity, short duration. It's going to provide better lubricity in the engine, but it's not going to give you longer life. And we see that from these results. But if we had used a different type of ester that maybe didn't provide enhanced lubricity, it may have extended that oxidation life. So it's really about what the application is. We mentioned that earlier. Application always dictates chemistry. And that's the key takeaway from this video, is that if you have a daily driver that's a stock engine, just use an oil that meets the spec. Any oil that has the API donut on it or the Dexo certification, it means it meets the spec. You can use it. It's going to work just fine. But if you track your car or you've made modifications to your engine, this is where the boutique blends can offer better protection or performance based on your application. And the key is not to look at what the ingredient list is. We just showed that that can be misleading. What you want to look for is engine test data that shows that this oil was formulated for engines like yours doing track use or racing or whatever it is, and they had the engine test data to back it up. So based on all of these results, comparing the Napa oil and our 2 lab blends, I think we should make a 0W40 using some different group 5 base oils. Maybe add in some of that MODTC, bump it up kind of like the Napa oil, and let's run some more lab tests, and then let's put that 0W40 in the Wombat and see how it compares to that Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. So if you think that's a good idea, leave a comment below and let me know. For a deeper dive into the testing that goes behind one of these API licensed products, check out the new API engine oil classification guide from Infineum. I'll leave a link in the description box below for it. It's a great resource that shows how much testing actually goes into making these products. So I hope you've enjoyed learning about how motor oil is actually made and the differences between a private label oil and a boutique blend and the testing that goes into making these products or the lack thereof. This has been a lot of fun. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you like this stuff, make sure you hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next video. In the meantime, check out one of these and we'll see you next time.